The first thing the Marines noticed was the silence. No jungle birds. No wind. Just a ghostly stillness hanging over the captured airstrip on Asuma Atoll as Corporal Jack Merritt raised his rifle and stepped toward the aircraft sitting alone near the far edge of the tarmac. It was a Japanese Zero fighter. Sleek, pale, and strangely untouched by battle. Its propeller was still, its canopy open, and its nose pointed toward the treeline as if the pilot had vanished mid-stride. But what froze Jack wasn't the plane itself. It was what he saw when he pressed his palm against the fuselage. His hand sank slightly. The metal wasn't metal. It felt thin, almost like stiff tin, nothing like the solid plating on American planes. "Sergeant, you need to see this," Jack whispered. Sergeant Bill Hart jogged over, chewing on the end of a cigar that had long since gone out. He slapped the Zero side, expecting a metallic thud. Instead, tap. A hollow, light, almost fragile knock. Bill's eyebrows pinched. What in the world? Jack stepped onto the wing, surprised again by how little weight it felt like it could carry, and peered into the cockpit. The seat was exposed. The rear was completely open. No armor plate. No bulletproof shield. Nothing separating the pilot from whatever was fired at him. Nothing. "Sergeant," Jack said, voice tightening. "This thing, it's got no armor. None at all." Bill's cigar nearly fell from his mouth. That can't be right. What kind of pilot goes to war in something like this? Before Jack could answer, something clicked beneath his boot, metal shifting inside the cockpit. He froze, eyes widening. There was a notebook wedged behind the seat. A pilot's logbook. He reached for it slowly, pulling the weather-worn cover into the light. The Japanese writing inside was clean, careful, and recent. The last written line had a date, just 3 days earlier. And beneath it, a short phrase in English. "You are too late." Jack felt his stomach drop. Someone had left this Zero here on purpose. Recently. And they knew Americans would find it. He turned to shout for Bill. But then the jungle behind them exploded. A violent crack tore through the silence. A rifle shot that slammed into the wing just inches from Jack's foot. More shots followed, echoing like firecrackers. Jack dove off the wing as Bill hit the ground, shouting for the squad to take cover. Marines scrambled behind crates, barrels, anything they could find. But the gunfire wasn't coming from the airstrip. It was coming from the very tree lane the Zero had been pointed toward, as if the pilot had walked straight into the jungle and left a trap behind. Jack crawled behind the wheel of an overturned cart as bullets chewed up the dirt around him. He gripped the pilot logbook tightly, heart hammering. If the Japanese pilot had written in English, he wasn't just a soldier. He wanted the Americans to understand something. But what? And why leave the Zero unguarded, perfectly intact, on an atoll with almost no Japanese presence left? Bill shouted, "Jack, we gotta fall back to the sandbag line. Move." Jack sprinted low across the runway, bullets slicing air behind him. Marines fired back, pushing into a defensive formation. Under the smoke and confusion, the Zero sat untouched, like a quiet witness staring at the chaos. Only then did Jack realize something chilling. Someone had allowed the Americans to find that plane. Someone wanted them to know the Zero was light, fragile, vulnerable. But the pilot who flew it, the one who walked into the jungle, he wasn't vulnerable at all. When the last shot faded and the Marines regrouped, Bill crouched beside Jack, panting hard. "You still got that book?" he asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah. But Sergeant, this wasn't just an abandoned aircraft. This was a message." Bill frowned. "Message? From who?" Jack swallowed. "From the pilot. And he's still out there." Bill stared at him, the realization hitting both men at the same time. The pilot had never intended to escape the island. He was waiting for them. And he had something planned. Jack opened the logbook to the page with the English line again. Under it, faintly in pencil, was another note, something he hadn't noticed before. A simple drawing. The outline of the island. A small X near the shoreline. And beneath it, 3 more English words. "Do not follow." Jack and Bill locked eyes. "We're following," Bill said. But just as they turned toward the direction of the marked X, a low mechanical hum rolled across the airstrip. Not from above. From underground. Something was moving beneath the old hangar. A hidden engine. A secret the Japanese had left behind. Jack's breath caught as he and the Marines raised their weapons, staring at the shaking hangar door. Something behind it was powering up. Something big. Something they weren't prepared for. The rumbling grew louder. Heavy, metallic, alive. Then the hangar door began to rise. And what Jack saw in the widening gap made his blood run cold. If you're enjoying the suspense so far, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it to support the storytelling. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done when you first saw that abandoned Zero? Also, let us know where you're watching from. The hangar door screeched as it lifted, metal grinding against rusted tracks, revealing only darkness inside. The Marines raised their rifles, fanning out carefully. Jack kept the pilot's logbook pressed against his chest, his heartbeat thrumming in his ears. The rumbling from within the hangar deepened, like some mechanical beast waking after years of sleep. Sergeant Bill Hart motioned for his squad to hold position. "Nobody fires unless I say so," he barked quietly. "Whatever's in there, we need to know what we're dealing with." The Marines waited. The rumbling stopped. Silence swallowed the airstrip again. Bill took a cautious step forward, gun raised. Jack followed, each step slow and deliberate. The air felt heavy, like the whole island was holding its breath. The hangar interior was pitch black, impossible to see more than a few feet in. Jack's finger hovered near his trigger. Then a faint voice echoed from inside. A man's voice. "You shouldn't have come here." Jack's breath froze. The voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't angry. It was calm, almost resigned. The tone of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Bill called out, "Identify yourself." Silence. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps approaching the opening. "Get ready," Bill hissed. The shape of a man emerged into the light. Thin, uniformed, hands empty. A Japanese pilot, no more than 30 years old, wearing a faded flight suit. His face was expressionless, unreadable. His eyes calm in a way that chilled Jack more than rage ever could. He stopped just outside the hangar, raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement. "My name is Lieutenant Sora Kameda," he said in accented but fluent English. "And if you are reading my book, then you already know." Jack instinctively gripped the logbook tighter. Bill stepped forward cautiously. "Why the hell did you ambush us?" Kameda shook his head. "Ambush? No. Warning." Jack felt a cold knot form in his gut. Warning about what? Before Kameda could answer, the ground beneath the hangar rumbled again. Not machinery this time, but something deeper. A vibration that made the dust tremble on the runway. Kameda closed his eyes briefly. "You were not meant to find this place. My orders were to destroy everything before leaving. But I disagreed. I believed someone should know." "Know what?" Bill demanded. Kameda looked at Jack, and for a moment, Jack felt like the pilot could see straight into him. "That Zero you found. It is not what you think. No armor, yes, that makes it light. Fast. Deadly. But your people will soon think this means we are weak. That we are desperate." He shook his head slowly. "But the truth is worse. Much worse." Jack stepped forward. "What truth?" Kameda motioned toward the dark hangar. "Inside are the remnants of a program your intelligence has not yet discovered. A project designed to change the direction of the war. It was abandoned when your forces advanced faster than expected. But not before something was built." Bill narrowed his eyes. "What, some kind of special weapon?" Kameda didn't answer. Instead, he dropped his gaze to the ground, his face tightening with something like guilt. "I went against my orders. I could not destroy it. I believed it should be seen by you. Because you're commanders. They must understand what Japan was willing to do." Jack's skin prickled. "So you left the Zero as bait?" Kameda nodded once. "A message. And a test." Bill scoffed. Test. For what? To see how quickly you would come. To see whether you would follow the map in the book. His voice softened. You did. Jack stared at the logbook again, thinking of the words "you are too late." Kameda gestured into the hangar. It is time you saw it. Bill hesitated only a moment before signaling 2 Marines forward to cover him. He and Jack stepped inside first, Kameda following slowly behind. The interior of the hangar was enormous. Faded paint, abandoned crates, tools scattered across the floor. But at the center, illuminated by a single shaft of sunlight piercing through a hole in the roof, was a massive object covered by a heavy tarp. Bill muttered, That better not be what I think it is." Kameda stepped forward, gripping the corner of the tarp. "When your people learn how our pilots flew without armor, they will believe we suffered. But you must understand we were committed. Too committed. And that commitment led to this." He pulled the tarp free. Jack's breath caught. Bill swore under his breath. The object beneath was unmistakable. A sleek, riveted metal structure shaped like the underside of an aircraft, but larger, longer, with strange circular ports and reinforced framing. Jack whispered, "That's not a plane." "No," Kameda said softly. "A prototype for something far more dangerous. A machine designed not for the skies, but for the sea." Bill took a step back. "Some kind of submersible." Kameda nodded. "A suicide submarine. Small, fast, and nearly impossible to detect." His voice broke slightly. "And I was assigned to test it. But I could not. I would not." Jack's pulse quickened. "If Japan had deployed hundreds of these, how many of these did your people build?" Bill asked. Kameda hesitated. Then the ground shook again. Harder this time. The Marines exchanged alarmed looks. Kameda stepped away from the prototype, his expression darkening. "That is the problem. I do not know. I was only told that once testing finished." His eyes drifted toward the coastline. They would release them. Bill's face paled. "Release? Into the Pacific?" Kameda nodded. Then a distant boom echoed from the shoreline, followed by the rising wail of a Marine lookout shouting from outside the hangar. "Sergeant, you need to see this. Now." Bill and Jack raced out, skidding to a halt as they looked toward the ocean. At least 7 dark shapes were moving beneath the waves, leaving faint trails of disturbed water. Jack felt his blood freeze. They weren't whales. They weren't rocks. They were moving too fast. Too precisely. Kameda stepped beside them, eyes hollow. "I think," he said quietly, "you are not too late after all." The dark shapes beneath the waves moved like a school of predators. Silent, coordinated, arrowing toward the shallow lagoon that bordered the captured airstrip. The Marines stationed along the beach shouted warnings, scrambling into defensive positions. Sandbags were overturned, machine guns swung into place, and binoculars snapped to eyes. Jack stared hard at the water. The shapes were growing clearer now, almost surfacing. Sergeant Bill Hart cursed under his breath. "Tell me those are just reef shadows." "They are not," Kameda replied quietly. One of the shapes broke the surface for a split second. A rounded metal nose, painted dark for camouflage, with a periscope-like tube rising behind it, before dipping back under. Jack felt his entire body tense. "Those things. They're already operational." Kameda's jaw tightened. They were never fully tested, but the engineers believed they were ready. Bill turned sharply. "Then why leave one in the hangar?" Kameda looked down. "That was mine. I refused to launch it." Bill stared at him, searching his face for any hint of deception. "How many men pilot those things?" A pause. "Only one," Kameda answered. Jack swallowed hard, imagining the claustrophobic metal coffin slicing through the ocean. "You're telling us Japan sent men underwater in those tiny tubes? Alone?" Kameda nodded. "It was considered an honor." Bill shook his head. "More like a death sentence." Before Kameda could respond, Another shout came from farther down the beach. They're heading for the inlet. They'll be inside the lagoon in seconds. Bill snapped into command mode. Merritt, get to the machine gun nest. Trent, Jacobs, on me. We're setting a perimeter. He turned to Kameda. You're staying with us, Lieutenant. You move without permission and I won't hesitate. Kameda said nothing, simply nodding once. Jack sprinted toward the machine gun position, sand kicking up behind him. Private Trent was already loading belts of ammunition as Jack jumped behind the gun and seized the handles. Targets visible. Jack shouted. Not yet. Trent answered. Then, a metallic shape surfaced fully near the inlet. Jack pulled the trigger. The machine gun roared, bullets stitching the water, kicking up plumes of spray. Another marine gun crew joined in, then another. The inlet thundered with fire. But the submersible dove instantly, vanishing into the depths. They're too fast. Trent yelled. Jack kept firing, sweeping the surface. Keep shooting. Don't let them get close. Behind them, Sergeant Bill took a position on the dunes, binoculars raised. Kameda stood beside him, squinting. They will not attack one by one, Kameda murmured. They were trained to move together, to strike like a coordinated blade. Bill shot him a sideways glare. And where exactly will that blade strike? Kameda didn't answer immediately. Then he pointed toward the far end of the runway. There. Your fuel depot. Bill's stomach tightened. He swung around to the Marines behind him. Move. Protect that fuel. Now. Jack heard the order faintly behind the gunfire, and his chest clenched. If those submersibles hit the fuel tanks, the entire airstrip would erupt like a volcano. Jack swung the machine gun right as another metallic nose breached the waves. He opened fire, and this time a lucky burst struck metal. The submersible jolted sideways, smoke spitting from its side. Marines cheered as it bobbed to the surface, dead in the water. But only for a moment. The hatch on the top snapped open. A man, soaking wet, wild-eyed, determined, pulled himself halfway out, clutching something cylindrical. Oh no, Trent whispered. Is that a... Before he could finish, the man lifted the object high. A charge. A suicide charge. Jack didn't think, he just fired. The bullets tore through the pilot and struck the device. A blinding flash split the air as the charge detonated prematurely, sending a towering geyser of water into the sky. The shockwave slammed into the shoreline, knocking several Marines off their feet. Jack ducked instinctively as water crashed down over them. Trent wiped his face, stunned. That guy. He was ready to blow us all to pieces. Jack didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the logbook tucked beside him, the pages fluttering slightly in the wind. Something about this felt wrong. Too coordinated. Too precise. Too prepared. Kameda had said he disobeyed orders. But if these submersibles were coming now, 3 days after the logbook's last entry, someone else had not. Someone else had launched them. Bill sprinted along the shoreline, shouting orders. Form a defensive ring around the fuel. Keep eyes on the water. Nobody relaxes until those things are gone. Jack scanned the waves again. The water was calm. Too calm. Trent exhaled shakily. Think that explosion scared the rest away? Jack didn't answer. His gut told him no. Kameda stepped forward, studying the lagoon with a haunted expression. They are not gone, he said quietly. They are repositioning. Jack turned sharply. For what? Kameda faced him fully. For the first time, a tremor of fear flickered in his eyes. For the second phase. Jack felt ice slide down his spine. Second phase. Kameda nodded gravely. The submersibles were designed to strike supply points. But if the defenders react quickly... He hesitated, swallowing tightly. Then the pilots were instructed to do something else. Bill approached, breath ragged. What else? Kameda closed his eyes. To come ashore. Jack blinked. Come ashore. Their underwater suicide craft. What are they supposed to do on land? Kameda took a slow, pained breath. They were trained to carry explosives. Enough to destroy whatever they reached. If the submersibles failed, he gestured toward the jungle. The pilots would swim, then walk. Bill's face drained of color. You're telling me there are men, right now, swimming toward this island with charges strapped to them? Kameda didn't speak. He didn't have to. As if on cue, a distant shout erupted from the tree lane near the southern edge of the airstrip. Movement in the jungle. Multiple contacts. Jack's pulse spiked. They hadn't repelled the attack. They'd triggered the next stage. Bill shouted. Weapons ready. They're coming through the trees. Let's move. Marines scrambled toward the tree lane. Jack grabbed his rifle, eyes sharp, adrenaline pumping. But just before he ran, he saw it again, the logbook lying open to a page that hadn't been there before. A page folded so carefully it could have been missed. He lifted it. A map. A crude drawing of the lagoon. And beside it, 3 symbols he didn't recognize. Kameda saw the page and his face went rigid. You must not go near those symbols, he said. Jack's breath hitched. Why not? Kameda stared at the jungle, his voice a whisper. Because that is where they will detonate. Jack froze. But then the jungle exploded with gunfire and shouting, forcing him to run. Behind him, the lagoon water rippled again. Something else, something larger, was rising from the depths. The rising shape in the lagoon was far larger than the submersibles they had seen earlier. It broke the water slowly, deliberately, metal groaning as if waking from a long sleep. Marines along the shoreline stopped firing into the jungle and turned toward the lagoon, stunned by the hulking shadow forcing its way to the surface. Jack and Bill reached the tree lane but froze when the booming echoes rolled across the airstrip. What in God's name is that? Trent gasped from the machine gun nest. The water bulged upward, then peeled away as something metallic surfaced fully. A looming cylinder with reinforced plating, multiple ports, and a thick armored hatch on top. It wasn't like the fragile Zero. This was something built to endure pressure, depth, and impact. Jack swallowed. That's no suicide craft. Kameda, who had followed silently to the edge of the beach, finally spoke. That was the command vessel. Bill turned sharply. Command what? Kameda's eyes locked onto the rising machine. The submersible squadron. The other pilots reported to its commander. It carries the detonators and the override signals. Bill stared at him. Override? For what? Kameda didn't answer. The hatch on the command vessel twisted with a grinding crack, then blew open with a burst of pent-up pressure. A figure emerged slowly, dragging himself into the sunlight. A man in a blackened Japanese naval uniform, soaked, coughing, but alive. His presence radiated authority, control, and focus. The commander. Even from a distance, Jack could feel the intensity of the man's gaze as he surveyed the shoreline. Kameda stiffened. Captain Riku Sato. Bill whispered. You know him. He trained me. He trained all of us. Jack watched as Sato descended the side of the vessel like a predator slinking into its territory. He didn't run. He didn't rush. He walked, like a man who feared nothing. Bill took 1 step forward, rifle raised. Marines, aim at that man. Before a trigger could be squeezed, Sato lifted a small device in his hand, a transmitter shaped like a thick metal rod with an antenna. He pressed a button. The ground shook violently beneath them. Bill shouted, Cover! Move! The Marines dove as the earth beneath the beach split open with a thunderous crack. Sand blew upward. The lagoon water pulled back in a sudden trough. And then, the hidden charges under the shoreline detonated. The explosion was massive, almost too bright to comprehend. Fire erupted across the water, sending waves as high as palm trees rolling onto the beach. Marines were thrown backward like dolls. Jack hit the ground hard, sand filling his mouth, his ears ringing. The shockwave tore through the airstrip, flipping crates, destroying equipment, and cracking the runway. For several seconds, the world was nothing but smoke, fire, and chaos. When Jack raised his head, coughing and blinking through debris, he saw the command vessel rocking from the blast, but still floating. Sato stood tall on the shoreline now, soaked and furious, one hand gripping the transmitter. Marines scrambled up, ears ringing, rifles trembling. What just happened? Trent cried, staggering beside Jack. Kameda stepped forward reluctantly. He detonated the defensive charges buried along the lagoon. I warned command about this months ago. They did not listen. Jack struggled to stand, gripping his rifle. Those charges were supposed to stop landing craft. Why detonate them now? Kameda looked sick. Because detonating them changes the shoreline. It floods the channels. It traps anything that tries to escape. Bill's face hardened. You mean, he's cutting us off? Kameda nodded. He intends to isolate the airstrip. Make it impossible for reinforcements to land by boat. As the smoke cleared, silhouettes emerged from the jungle. Japanese pilots, soaked from the swim, explosives strapped to their backs. Jack raised his weapon instinctively. Bill shouted, "Hold your ground. Do not let them reach the depot." Gunfire re-erupted in a deafening cascade. Marines and Japanese fighters clashed at the tree-line, bullets cracking through leaves, men shouting orders and screams mixing with the roaring waves. Jack grabbed Trent by the arm. "We need to push them back. Now." They rushed forward, opening fire. One of the Japanese pilots lunged with a desperate cry, clutching a detonator, but Jack shot him before he reached the sandbags. Behind them, Sato walked closer, expression cold and calculating. He never fired a gun. He didn't need to. His job was coordination, not combat. Jack realized Sato wasn't watching the Marines. He was watching Kameda. Bill yelled over the battle. "Why is he looking at you?" Kameda didn't answer immediately. His jaw clenched as if holding back a truth he hated. Finally, he whispered, "Because I was supposed to be his successor." Jack stared at him. "Successor? What do you mean?" Kameda swallowed, eyes darting to the command vessel. "That submersible fleet. The program. The mission. I was trained to lead it. But I refused. I tried to destroy the prototype. I failed. And now he knows I betrayed the cause." Bill's voice hardened. "So he's here to finish the job. Including you." Kameda nodded. "Yes." As the battle intensified, something strange happened. The water behind the command vessel began swirling, forming a circular vortex. Jack squinted at the waves. "What now?" Kameda's eyes widened in horror. "No." Bill turned. "What is it?" "The command vessel. It is activating its ballast tanks." "That means..." Before he could finish, the vessel's rear section collapsed backward, opening like a jaw. A massive shape began rising inside it. Jack's breath hitched. It wasn't another submersible. It was a weapon. Something terrifying in scale. The Marines stopped firing for a moment, staring in disbelief as the outline grew clearer. Kameda whispered, voice shaking for the first time. "He brought the warhead." Bill turned sharply. "The what?" "The warhead," Kameda shouted. "It was meant to destroy an entire carrier deck. They never tested it. They never dared." Jack felt his heartbeat stall. Sato stepped forward, transmitter in hand, staring at the Marines. He spoke loud enough for all to hear. "You should not have come here." Jack lifted his weapon with trembling hands. Because now, the battle wasn't about defending the airstrip. It was about stopping a single man from unleashing a weapon designed to sink a fleet. And he was only steps away from activating it. If you're enjoying the story, please kindly subscribe to this channel and share the story with your loved ones. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stand still. Marines froze mid-reload. The Japanese swimmers emerging from the water hesitated. Even the crashing waves seemed to quiet as the massive shape inside the command vessel rose higher, dripping seawater, casting a dark shadow over the cracked runway. Jack stared at it chest tight. The object was long reinforced, almost like a thick torpedo, but larger with angular fins and a protective casing that wasn't fully sealed. It looked experimental, dangerous, raw. Kameda stepped forward, voice trembling but resolute. That warhead was never meant to leave the testing facility. Bill snapped toward him. Then what's inside it? Explosives? Fuel? Kameda shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the weapon. Not fuel. Something worse. Jack swallowed. Worse how? Kameda hesitated, then answered in a low voice. It was designed to ignite everything within its radius. A chain reaction. Heat, shock, wave. Enough to tear apart metal, wood, flesh, tear the hulls of ships without direct contact. Trent's voice cracked. Are you saying it's some kind of super torpedo? Kameda backed away slightly, his fear turning into urgency. It was unstable. The engineers named it the Twin Sunday. They said if it ever detonated, you wouldn't survive even at a distance. Bill exhaled hard. So if Captain Sato triggers that thing, he'll wipe out the entire island, Kameda finished. And everyone on it. The command vessel shuddered again as the warhead settled into place. Sato stepped down from the platform, eyes calm, transmitter still in hand. His uniform clung to him, soaked, but he moved with terrifying purpose, like a man fulfilling destiny. Jack lifted his rifle. Sergeant, we have to stop him right now. Bill scanned the battlefield. The Marines were pinned between two threats. The Japanese swimmers, who were now retreating toward the lagoon, and the massive warhead rising behind Sato. The jungle skirmish had broken apart. The pilots were pulling back, no longer focused on attacking. Bill frowned. Why are they falling back? Kameda answered softly. They have orders. Sato is about to complete the mission alone. Jack stiffened. This wasn't an attack anymore. It was a sacrifice. Bill barked to the squad. Shift fire. Forget the shoreline. Focus on Sato and that warhead. Marines reoriented instantly. Rifle shots cracked across the clearing. Bullets kicked up sand at Sato's feet, but he kept walking, slow and deliberate, as if daring them to hit him. Kameda. Bill shouted. Is that transmitter linked to the warhead? Kameda nodded. Yes. So if we shoot it. Kameda cut him off, shouting over the gunfire. If you shoot it, you risk triggering the warhead. The signal might spike. Jack stopped dead. So we can't hit Sato. And we can't hit the device. Bill cursed loudly. So what the hell can we shoot? Kameda clenched his fists. The vessel itself. The power core is inside the hull. If you destroy its control system, he cannot prime the warhead. That's all I needed to hear. Jack shouted, swinging his rifle toward the vessel. But at that moment, Sato lifted the transmitter. A piercing tone echoed across the lagoon, a sound so sharp it rattled loose metal, sent birds fleeing the treetops, and made Jack's bones vibrate. Kameda's eyes widened in horror. No, he's initializing power. He's waking the device. Bill shouted. All fire on the vessel. Now. The Marines unleashed everything. Machine guns roared, rifles thundered. Grenades arced across the sand. The command vessel shook under the barrage, sparks leaping from its hull. But it didn't fall. Inside the warhead casing, faint lights flickered, red, then orange, then pulsing brighter. Jack's mouth went dry. It's active. The water surged around the vessel as if reacting to energy building inside it. Kameda stepped forward, desperation cracking his calm facade. Captain Sato. Stop. You were not meant to use it. This was only a threat, not a final weapon. Sato turned his head slightly. His voice was calm. Too calm. War has no threats left. Only endings. Then he pressed another button. The ground vibrated again as the warhead's fins adjusted. Click, lock, click, aligning themselves like the blades of a monstrous machine. Bill lowered his rifle slightly. Disbelief in his voice. Is he aiming it? Kameda exhaled shakily. Toward the airstrip. Toward us. Jack's heart hammered in his chest. We have seconds, maybe less. Marines fired relentlessly. but the vessel's armor was too thick. Bullets flattened. Grenades rolled off. The warhead lights glowed brighter. Orange. Red. White. Sato stepped closer to the water. His transmitter angled downward, preparing the final command. Jack felt a surge of cold terror. If he sends the ignition code. Kameda didn't let him finish. He suddenly sprinted forward. Kameda. Bill shouted. Stop! But Kameda didn't listen. He charged toward Sato with a fury none of them had seen in him, a desperation born of guilt, duty, and fear. Sato turned as he approached, eyes narrowing. Kameda, he said softly as if disappointed. I knew you would betray us. Kameda lunged, tackling Sato to the sand. The transmitter flew from Sato's grip, skidding across the ground. Jack saw his chance and sprinted toward it. But Sato recovered faster than expected. He slammed his knee into Kameda's ribs, flipping him over. They grappled violently, fists striking with bone-breaking force. Kameda fought savagely, grabbing Sato's wrist, preventing him from reaching the transmitter. Bill shouted, Take the shot. Jack raised his rifle but froze. If he shot and hit the transmitter, the warhead might detonate. If he shot and killed Kameda, they'd lose their only ally. If he shot and missed Sato, they'd have no time left. He couldn't risk any of it. Sato wrenched free, slamming Kameda's head into the sand. Jack sprinted toward the transmitter, diving as bullets cracked near him. His fingers brushed it, but Sato's boot came down on his hand so hard Jack screamed. Sato leaned down, grabbing the transmitter slowly, lifting it with cold precision. Kameda gasped weakly. Jack, stop him. Jack looked up, vision swimming, his hand crushed under Sato's heel. Sato raised the transmitter high, ready to send the ignition command. Then, a shrill alarm erupted from the warhead. Jack's eyes widened. Kameda rasped, voice weak but determined. That sound, that means there is one stage left. Sato looked down at him, eyes burning with rage. And you will not live to stop it. He lifted the transmitter higher, and the warhead began to glow bright enough to light the entire shoreline. Jack knew they had only one moment left. One impossible moment to stop a weapon designed to destroy a fleet. The blinding white glow from the warhead bathed the cracked runway, the beach, the jungle, everything. It wasn't the glow of normal explosives. It was unnatural, pulsing with an almost living rhythm, expanding like a second sunrise. Jack's heart pounded so hard he felt it in his throat. His crushed hand throbbed beneath Captain Sato's boot, each pulse screaming through his bones. But he ignored the pain. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and they were all gone. Sato raised the transmitter higher. His expression was calm, disturbingly calm for a man about to sacrifice himself and the entire island. Kameda, Sato said, eyes fixed on his former student. Your loyalty died long before today. Kameda, blood running from his temple, forced himself onto his elbows. You told us our duty was to protect Japan, not destroy our own souls. This weapon was never meant to be used. Sato's stare hardened. Japan faces defeat. Honor demands sacrifice. Jack could barely speak through the pain. Kameda, if he sends that code. I know, Kameda gasped. I know. He staggered to his feet, wobbling but refusing to fall. Marines in the distance tried to get closer, but stray Japanese swimmers, wounded but determined, exchanged gunfire with them. The battlefield crackled with tension. Bill shouted, Jack, we need to hit the vessel. Aim for anything glowing. Jack gritted his teeth. Bill, I can't move my hand. Bill cursed under his breath. We have to do something. Now. Kameda stumbled forward again, coughing hard. Sato shifted, pushing his boot harder into Jack's injured hand, pinning him even more brutally. Jack bit down on a scream. He tried to pull free, but Sato was immovable, like steel. Then Kameda lunged. He didn't fight Sato. He didn't reach for the transmitter. He went for the warhead. Jack's eyes widened. No, Kameda, don't. Kameda slammed both hands against a panel on the warhead's protective casing. Instantly, the glow faltered. Sato's face snapped toward him. Fury. Panic. Kameda. Stop. Kameda pushed the panel with every ounce of strength left in him. There was a sharp metallic click, a deep structural noise, like a latch releasing. Jack realized what he had done. He opened the heat vent. Jack gasped. He's forcing it to cool. Sato roared and sprinted toward him, leaving Jack free as his boot lifted. Jack seized the moment, rolling away and clutching his throbbing hand. Kameda shoved again. The vent opened wider. The warhead's core glow dimmed sharply, flickering from blinding white to burning orange. Sato grabbed Kameda by the collar and threw him backward so violently that Kameda's body skidded across the sand. Marines tried to provide cover, but gunfire from the lagoon kept them pinned. Kameda coughed blood, forcing himself upright. The device can't detonate cleanly if it's cooling. Sato turned slowly, transmitter in hand. You have doomed yourself. And your honor. Kameda shook his head through pain. Honor isn't blind obedience. Jack steadied himself, rifle trembling in his good hand. Bill and 3 Marines appeared behind him, ready but terrified. Then Sato pressed a button. A tone rang out. Higher, sharper, urgent. Kameda's eyes widened. He's forcing a manual override. Jack shouted. What does that mean? Kameda spit blood. If the core cannot heat fully, it collapses instead violently. Bill shouted. You're telling me he's about to turn it into a dirty blast? Yes. Kameda rasped. One that will shred the island. The warhead began to shake violently, metal plates rattling. Jack steadied his rifle. He didn't aim at Sato. He aimed at the warhead vent. Bill yelled. Jack, don't, it could. Jack fired. The bullet smashed into the vent's hinge, blowing it fully open. Steam exploded outward in a violent hiss. The warhead lights flickered white to yellow to red. Sato spun toward Jack, eyes blazing. Fool. He raised the transmitter. But Kameda tackled him again. This time, both men tumbled dangerously close to the edge of the lagoon. Water sprayed over them as they fought. Sato lifted the transmitter to strike, but Kameda grabbed his arm. Jack staggered forward. Kameda. Hold him. Kameda screamed back. Destroy the transmitter. Bill raised his rifle. You said hitting it could trigger the signal. Kameda, barely holding Sato back, shouted. Not if you hit the antenna. Break the antenna. Jack's vision blurred. His hand throbbed. Sand clung to his face. He raised his rifle again, lining up the shot. Sato saw him, eyes widening. With savage strength, he twisted Kameda's arm and slammed him into the sand. Kameda went limp for half a second. Just enough for Sato to rise. Sato lifted the transmitter again. Jack knew he had exactly one shot. One impossible shot. Hit the antenna, and he could stop Sato. Hit the body and they all died. His injured hand shook violently. He inhaled. Steadied. Fired. The bullet hit the transmitter's antenna cleanly. It snapped off and flew into the lagoon. Sato froze in disbelief. The transmitter sparked, short-circuited, and went dead. Kameda gasped, crawling toward the warhead. The reaction. It's not stopping. Jack turned sharply. What? I thought destroying the transmitter. Kameda shook his head weakly. The override already began. The core is collapsing. It cannot stabilize. Bill shouted to the Marines. Fall back. Fall back. But Kameda pushed himself toward the warhead, reaching for the open vent, blood dripping from his chin. Kameda. Jack yelled. Get away from it. He didn't listen. He put both hands into the vent, trying to manually force the inner chamber open wider. Sato lunged to stop him, but Jack tackled Sato with every ounce of strength he had left. They rolled across the sand, fists flying. Sato grabbed a rock, swinging it toward Jack's head. But Bill shot it from his hand. Back off. Bill barked. The warhead's glow dimmed again, flickering like a dying star. Kameda collapsed beside it, breathing hard. It's slowing. Jack rushed to him. Did you stop it? Kameda nodded weakly. For now. Bill kneeled beside them. For now. What does that mean? Kameda swallowed, barely conscious. The core is damaged. It may reignite, or collapse. Either could kill us. Jack whispered. So what do we do? Kameda's eyes fluttered half-closed. You must get it into the sea, far from shore, before it decides for us. Bill cursed, standing. We'll need all hands for that. Jack turned to shout orders. But before he could speak, a voice rose behind them. Captain Sato. He stood again. Hurt, bloody, but not defeated. His glare burned with hatred and purpose. You may have slowed it, he said, but you will never take it from this island. Jack lifted his rifle. Bill aimed. Marines turned. Sato reached behind him and pulled out a second device. Another transmitter. Smaller. Hidden in his belt. Kameda's eyes snapped open in terror. Jack. Don't let him press IT. Jack raised his rifle. But Sato's thumb was already dropping toward the button. Jack fired before Sato's thumb touched the button. The shot punched through Sato's wrist with brutal precision, sending the second transmitter spinning into the air. Sato screamed and stumbled backward, clutching his mangled arm. The device struck the sand and cracked open, sparks hissing as seawater splashed over it from the churning lagoon. Bill shouted, "Move! Secure the warhead now!" Jack didn't wait. He ran straight for the massive weapon, ignoring the fiery agony in his crushed hand. Marines surged from their positions, forming a loose perimeter around the trembling warhead. The glow inside its casing had dimmed to a sickly orange now, pulsing irregularly, like a dying heart struggling to beat. Kameda sat slumped against the sand, barely conscious, chest rising shallowly. Jack knelt beside him. "Stay with me. You got us this far." Kameda whispered hoarsely. "Hurry, before it wakes again." Bill pointed toward the lagoon. "We're pushing it into the water. Everyone on my command." Marines grabbed ropes, belts, even broken pieces of metal to wedge under the warhead's fins. The weapon was monstrous in weight, but desperation gave strength where muscle failed. They heaved with everything they had, boots digging deep into wet sand. "Push!" Bill roared. The warhead groaned and rolled an inch. Again. Another shove. Another groan. Inch by inch, they dragged it toward the tide. Jack strained at the front, teeth clenched, feeling the weight tearing through his bruised ribs. Trent appeared beside him, panting hard. "That thing weighs more than a truck." Jack wheezed. "Then we push like guys who don't want to die." They pushed harder. 1 foot. 2. The tide surged and pulled, as if the ocean itself wanted the weapon gone. Behind them, Captain Sato staggered to his feet again. His wrist was bleeding badly, but his expression had twisted into pure desperation. "Stop!" he screamed. "You cannot take it. It is our sacrifice." Bill spun and fired a warning shot into the sand at Sato's feet. "Stay down." But Sato didn't. His eyes were wild, driven by a loyalty deeper than survival. He reached down and lifted a jagged shard of metal. Jack shouted, "Bill! He's coming!" Bill aimed. Sato charged. He didn't go for Bill. He sprinted toward Jack, toward the warhead, toward the vent Kameda had opened. Jack stumbled back. "No, stop!" Sato leapt. But Kameda, barely conscious, dragged himself up and threw his body into Sato's path. The two men collided violently. Sato's metal shard plunged into Kameda's side. Kameda choked in agony, but he held Sato's arm tight, refusing to let go. Jack screamed, "Kameda!" Kameda looked up at him through fading eyes. "Push it, Jack." Jack froze, stunned by the sacrifice. Sato tried to wrench free, screaming in fury, "Traitor! Traitor!" But Kameda held him with the last of his strength, forcing Sato to the ground. Jack made a choice. A terrible, necessary choice. He turned from them. Push! The Marines shouted as one and drove their shoulders and hands into the warhead. The tide hit them hard, foam surging around their legs. Every inch felt like lifting a mountain. Sato thrashed under Kameda's weakening grip. No, no. Kameda gritted his teeth, blood pooling beneath him. Honor is choosing life, not death. Sato howled, trying to reach the warhead, but Kameda kept him pinned. Jack pushed with everything he had. Suddenly the warhead tipped, its nose dipping into the lagoon. Bill yelled, "Don't stop!" They pushed harder. The water seized the weight, dragging it deeper, faster. The warhead slid under the surface, disappearing into the blue, sinking toward the deeper waters beyond the reef. As soon as it vanished, the pulsating light faded completely. The glow died. Silence followed. The warhead was gone. Jack collapsed to his knees, gasping. Sato, realizing what had happened, let out a scream of despair that echoed across the broken beach. He smashed his fist into the sand, sobbing and furious. Kameda fell back, body limp. Jack crawled to him, frantic. "Kameda, stay awake, stay with us." Kameda's breathing was shallow, but he smiled faintly. "You stopped it. You saved them." Jack shook his head. "We saved each other." Kameda's gaze softened, drifting toward the sky. "War teaches us to fear enemies. But sometimes, enemies make the right choices." Jack gripped his shoulder. "We're getting you help." Kameda whispered one final word. "Live." Then his body went still. Jack bowed his head. Bill placed a hand on Jack's back. He was brave. Braver than many of us. Sato was dragged away by Marines, no longer screaming. Just broken, staring blankly at the lagoon where the warhead had disappeared. The battle was over. The island was safe. But the cost was heavy. As reinforcements arrived by sea hours later, Jack stood on the beach, watching the calm water where the warhead had vanished. The sun dipped low, reflecting off the waves. Trent came up beside him. "You think it's really down there?" "Deep enough." Jack nodded slowly. "Deep enough that it'll never hurt anyone." Bill approached with a solemn expression. "Command wants a full report. They're stunned a Zero pilot saved the island." Jack looked at the pilot's logbook in his hand. The writing, the warnings, the map. "He didn't just save the island," Jack said quietly. "He saved us from a weapon nobody should ever use." Bill nodded. "Maybe one day people will understand what really happened here." Jack exhaled slowly. "Maybe. But today, I'm just glad we're alive." They stood together, the sun sinking behind them, the lagoon calm once more. The battle had ended. The island had held. And an American Marine and a Japanese pilot had defied war itself to stop a disaster that never should have existed. Jack slipped the logbook into his pocket as the waves washed quietly onto the shore. Some stories of war were about fighting, but some were about choosing to save. Thank you for following this story to the end. If you want another WW2 story tailored for YouTube in this exact gripping style, just tell me the title and theme you want next.